Welcome back to the PeopleFirst Podcast, the Young Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me again today. On today's episode, we're going to be dissecting workplace conflict, and I'm joined by the amazing Vince Sanderson, who's going to help us understand how to communicate better in the workplace, how to mediate difficult conversations, and how maybe to understand different ways of working with different people. Welcome to the podcast, Vince.
Thank you.
Something we ask all our guests is if you could tell me about your very first job.
Very first job,
Yeah.
I was a teacher.
Okay.
Secondary school teacher, which normally surprises people because now I am a management consultant, work with businesses,
Yeah.
but it didn't start there. So I graduated uni and completely different, wanted to be a dentist first
Okay.
of all, and then decided, do you know what, I don't want to spend another 5 years at uni. I'm
Very
going to go
admirable professions, a dentist and a teacher, to be
Yeah,
fair.
I'm giving back to the community.
Yeah.
And decided, you know what, I want to teach and inspire the next generation, as many teachers do when they want to go in. And after a few years, found I loved the teaching, but didn't love all of the work that went around it.
Okay.
And decided to leave teaching and ended up in mediation.
Okay. And you've touched on it briefly, but can you tell me about your background as a
Yes.
workplace mediator? How did you get to this point from teaching to now?
So I left teaching, but still wanted to work with teenagers
Yeah.
at the time. So I moved into the youth offending service.
Okay.
As part of that,
Interesting.
I know it's a bit of a weird way to get into what I do now, but part of that, I was seconded to be work with victims of young people's criminal offences, low-level stuff.
Yeah.
And part of it's called an out-of-court disposal, is that you can bring those people together if they choose to come together.
So not to interrupt you, but that is like if I came and stole a woman's handbag, right? Petty
Absolutely.
crime.
Yes.
And she wants to bring us together, or maybe my parents or something is. So that
Yeah.
it's that sort of situation, yeah? Like
absolutely.
a small crime that needs mediated.
Yeah,
right,
so the
okay.
most common one was theft from a shop.
Right, okay.
So the owner of the shop can say, yeah, I want mediation, but the young person has to agree to it too.
Okay.
And so for a year, I spent time mediating between teenagers and people who were victims of their crimes.
Fair. That's
And
great.
then from there, I met someone that was setting up a mediation firm, and they invited me over as part of the startup team.
Great.
And it went from there.
And the rest is history.
Yes.
And was there something maybe that happened in your own career or that led you into mediation specifically? You know, did you have any conflict early on that sort of brought this journey on?
No. So quite interestingly, the very opposite
Okay.
is probably more true, in that I am generally, now is a little bit different, but used to be really uncomfortable with conflict, didn't
Yeah.
enjoy it at all. And I think maybe part of what drew me a little bit towards mediation was that there was a process to it
Okay.
that helped me feel more comfortable with having difficult conversations with people. And the more that I then practiced that as a mediator, the more I found it helped in my own life, personal life, work life, in having difficult conversations with people. So at the start I was, oh no, I don't like this particularly. Certainly
Yeah.
as a teacher, it was one of the areas that I was probably weakest in,
Yeah.
was having those challenging conversations. Whereas now I would say it was a strength.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I said before we even sat down to film this podcast that I haven't really experienced much like workplace conflict or had need for mediation. But now that I'm thinking back, I grew up as a child of divorced parents. And
okay.
I remember now sitting in my mum's living room and having that mediator come round, asking us questions. Did we want to speak to our dad? Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have the same relationship with my dad's side of the family now without that experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of bitterness in both sides, and we needed someone really impartial to come in and sort of see that. And I'm only remembering this now that we're sort of chatting. So what would you say is the most common occurrence that would need mediation?
So in work, you get lots of different presenting causes or issues. So for example, one of the issues that I dealt with pre-COVID, so 5+ years ago now, was my colleague clicks their pen all of the time and it drives me crazy.
Okay.
Now, for this to get to an external mediator, that's got to have gone through the manager, probably
Layers
and layers, and it's causing a ripple effect in the team. When you boil it down, and this is true for almost all of the mediation cases, it really comes down to, I feel hurt.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's no trust between us.
Okay.
So the presenting issue can be all sorts of different things, but generally it comes down to that. I don't trust in our relationship anymore because maybe I've tried to resolve it. Maybe I tried to ask nicely.
Yeah.
Can you please not click your pen?
Yeah.
Or the other kind of element that it kind of tags onto is something about our character and our values that we have. So with the clicking of the pen, if you were doing it, I might think, I would never do that myself.
Mine's typing on the keys.
That's
I'm a
another
really
one.
typer.
Yeah. Some of the other funny ones: clicking pens, typing on keyboards. Someone cleaned their ear with the end of their pen, and it just disgusted the other person.
Right.
But they try to resolve it in however they do. Now, when I say try to resolve it, lots of people won't just sit down and have a conversation. They'll talk to other people. There'll be a global email that's sent out around. Just be mindful of,
of your behavior, your
things like that. So
things,
lots of people are avoidant of having conversations because it brings up so many difficult and uncomfortable emotions for them. But generally, most people will fall into a very common trap where we see you behave in a certain way and we attach that to your character. And I would say, Jordan is an unfair person. Jordan's a disrespectful person because of what he does. But when I do something similar, I don't attach that to my character. That's something that's just happened. So the easiest way of explaining it would be, if we were driving and you cut me up, I might get really annoyed and be like, that person's an idiot. They always behave this way. And so I attach it to your character, your mistake to your character. But if I accidentally cut somebody up, it was just an accident. It's nothing to do with my character. So that is actually one of the most common reasons that people fall out and need mediation, is they attach a behavior, a mistake, to someone's character, and it causes a big wedge between us. And we really struggle to rebuild that, because it isn't now just something that you've done wrong. It's, you're wrong, you're not fair, you're not respectful, you're not kind, and I don't see myself like that. So we're very different people. And getting back from that point is really quite tricky to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's get into some sort of specific examples. There's a range of conflict that we can go through, and some of it can be quite serious. But let's just say that you just had a personality clash with someone in your team or someone that you work with. How can we get around this? How can we navigate this?
So a personality clash, as you said, there's a range of it, and we often use it very quickly, or I hear people use it, we're just too different, there's just a personality clash. And again, most of the time, people want the same things and they see themselves the same way. So we might both agree that we're fair people, we're kind people, we're thoughtful people, but we do make mistakes. And that's where that fundamental attribution error kicks in, is when you make a mistake, I will attach that to your personality. And when I make a mistake, it's just a mistake and not my personality. And so most personality clashes are not really personality clashes. And this is a really bitter pill to swallow, that it might be how we perceive it. However, sometimes it is a personality clash. What do we do about it? The most effective teams don't tend to have too many personality clashes. Now, that's not because they have different people, as in they do have lots of different people working with them. So how do these teams get around having people from different places in the world, different upbringings, different goals in life, and yet they're still really effective, and other teams might struggle with it? The most common reason is they have an agreed sense of purpose. So regardless of our upbringing, regardless of how we might see the answer to this problem, what we can agree on is that we want the same answer. And when teams work on difficult things together, when they work in a culture that, and this is huge for leadership and management, they work in a culture that talks openly about diversity, that encourages it, that tries to stop groupthink happening, which is, it feels nice at the start when we're all the same and we all think the same way, but actually that really stifles creativity and innovation. It really, in the long run, it causes lots of problems because we can go off in completely the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So a lot of, coming back to the original question, a lot of personality clashes, can be prevented by recognizing that actually it's really good to be different.
Yeah,
it's really
100%.
We want different personalities. We want challenge.
Yeah.
A team that's silent and that has fake harmony is not going to be successful.
Yeah, of course.
So we're going to clash at some point. We're going to disagree, but being mindful that I'm not attaching it to your character, but really valuing, oh, do you know what, Vince? I disagree with that. I don't think that's the way we should achieve this outcome.
100%. I completely agree. And I can think about people that I work with now. And a colleague, Ruby, for example, I'm going to name her by name because she watches this podcast every week. But she's so different to me.
Yeah.
So different. And our strengths and weaknesses balance each other out. We have totally different ways of working where we totally clash, but it develops a better outcome.
Yes.
I'm a firm believer in that, like, difference of opinion is what makes us equal as humans, if that makes sense. You know, we aren't supposed to agree. But if we go back a little bit and say, I have done something and I know I'm in the wrong.
Yes.
And maybe I've spoke to Ruby a little out of turn, or I've been a little too harsh or something like that. Is there ways that we can bring that back without going straight into mediation, for example?
Yes. And it's a very simple answer. You hold up your hands and you go, I was wrong. I got that wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it seems simple, but you'll probably experienced in your career at some point that that's really difficult to do at times.
100%. Just holding your hands up. I get it. I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum, Vince. Like, I apologize for things I'm not even sorry for because I like to just move on. But some people quite struggle to admit that they're in the wrong, you know?
So they see an apology as a sign of weakness and it's vulnerable. But many, certainly of your listeners, may have come across Brene Brown, and her research shows that vulnerability and holding our hands up and going, do you know what? I was wrong, I made a mistake, is a really brave and courageous thing to do. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of strength. But imagine a team of people that straight away held up their hands and went, I think I was wrong. I think you were right there.
Yeah.
How quickly you can move on from things and find the right path forward compared to being stifled and the team stagnates because people won't apologize.
Yeah.
Honestly, it really is as simple as that outwardly. But inwardly, it's being mindful of the self-talk that you have. What's going on in your head that's stopping you from going, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Yeah. And a lot of people do struggle to, I don't think many people can struggle to admit when they're in the wrong, or like struggle to apologize and stuff like that. But it is pretty easy. Do you know what I mean? Just to hold your hands up. Like.
Absolutely. The most important thing in terms of a team, because I'm sure many of your listeners are a part of a workforce and a team that are trying to navigate how to work more effectively together. The single biggest defining factor of teams that can apologize and move on is the manager.
Yeah.
A manager that's not willing to do that themselves sets the tone for the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And a manager that is willing to go first, is willing to be the most stupid person in the room and go, do you know what? I don't understand that.
Yeah.
What does that mean again? Allows everybody else to do it as well.
Yeah.
And it's the same with an apology. So if you've got a leader or a manager that goes, I'm really sorry, I made a mistake there, it signals to the rest of the team that that's perfectly acceptable. Actually, it's encouraged here.
Yeah.
Because the quicker we are able to do that, the quicker we can move on from it.
Yeah, of course. I think I agree with that. And would you say that there's anything, like if you were thinking about the workplace, did generational divides come into this? Like, do you think that it's maybe like Gen Z millennial workforce, do you think they're more open, more accepting? Do you think it's the other way around?
So this is always a delicate subject.
Okay.
And so I will make some delicate general statements.
Okay, come on, let's go.
And,
Let's roll them off.
And then give some personal examples as well. Okay. So and these are my observations. speaking to family members that are, a lot older, working with lots of people across different sectors that are older as well, that there is a difference in each generation, and that almost all of the time, potentially all of the time, the older generation will find a little bit of fault in the next generation. And I do that with the same with my kids. Oh, I wouldn't have done that. And I'll give you an example. My son did something the other day. He wasn't coming off the park, and he's 8 years old. And I turned to my wife and I said, I don't remember ever complaining to my mum and dad when they said, oh, come on, it's time to go home. But my son, he's always doing it. Were we like this? And it's just a kind of a small example of, we will always try and find even just a little bit of fault how we were better in our own generation. So yes, there is always a slight generational divide, in my opinion. Is one better than the other? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
There is some great characteristics. I'll give you an example from my parents and grandparents. Super resilient.
Yeah, 100%.
Hard worker. Never asked anything of anyone. Is that always a good thing? No. Because there are times when we need to go, I need help.
Yeah.
And my gramps would be a great example of it, where he was so single-minded and belligerent, and it was a strength in some areas, and then other areas, as he got older, you just wanted to say, just ask for help.
Just ask for help. Vince, I think I was about 20 at the time, 21. I did 5 days work experience with my granny. She was a financial controller in industrial business or whatever. I didn't like her at the end of the week. I didn't even want to be, do you know what I mean? I didn't know how anyone worked for her. No, she got the job done, and I've realized as I've grew up, she really carried that business on her back. But in that environment of being in that finance office with her and seeing the way she worked, it made me think of her differently.
Yes,
do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that was just, even now we grew up, I've lived with her since. We have such a great relationship, and I know that I say to her openly that she is backward, but she just has her way of working, and she thinks that I am just some liberal, do you know what I mean, snowflake in work. But you really can feel that generational divide, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And different experiences give us a different perception of who we work with. So I'm in a really fortunate position where I work with all sorts of different ages across all sorts of different sectors. And one of the things that I have noticed is with the older generation, one of the differences is they were often constricted by geography.
Yeah.
So you go to school, and because most people of an older generation tended not to move too far, in school, there was going to be someone that would be the doctor, someone that would be the lawyer, someone that would work in a shop, someone that would work in a factory. And their experience of what work was controlled or influenced by the people around them and their experience and who they spoke to. So I live in Wales now. So a great example of this would be the miners. They had to put up with all sorts of rubbish working conditions.
Yeah.
Now, as a younger person, we might look at that and go, well, why did you put up with it? Just say no.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very luxurious position. If
there was an opportunity. Yeah, exactly.
If you don't have another job to go to, you are much more controlled by what that organization, the company says, the manager. So yes, there may be a generational divide potentially in what younger people expect from the workforce now, because they can go anywhere, go to any job potentially, and also then social media, they see other people talking about it. So my gramps might have only been influenced by 10 people on a regular basis, whereas I can be influenced by hundreds of thousands of people talking about their experience of their job. So when someone says on social media, oh, I get this perk and this benefit and my manager treats me really, really well, but my experience is I don't get any of those things and I'm not treated well, it might influence me to job hop more often, to find what someone else has got.
What someone else has, and we always want what we don't have, don't we? There is that level of natural envy. Sorry, I cut you off there.
Oh no, that's okay. So one of the things that we hear, there's no loyalty nowadays, but I think that's a two-way street. Loyalty is from a company to the employee as well as the employee to the company. And I think that there's a fine balance to get right there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily a generational divide, but I certainly think that there can be a generational divide based on circumstance that people grew up in and experience themselves.
Yeah. I think as well, I know I do as well, me being me and being my age and work, I like the environment that I have, or you can carve out, I think I know it all and I've been in the game for 10 years, but you know what you want out of your working environment and what you sort of expect. Whereas I think the older generations, they just get on with it a bit more. Like we've talked about the mines and being a steel worker, there's no other opportunity for them. If we bring it back into the workplace and we do find, if it is that generational thing, or we find that there is someone that we are having conflict with, can we address it with them directly? Would you advise that? At what point do we pull in more senior people, HR, that sort of thing?
So this would be entirely situational dependent.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something severe and it's way out of your comfort and skill level, so let's say it was a real harassment issue, a bullying issue, absolutely go to someone that has expertise in that. And I wouldn't suggest to someone, try and work it out yourself, because there could be all sorts of background to it that we're not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not at a more serious level and it's more day-to-day stuff, it would be wonderful if people could try to resolve it. So if there's conflict between us, we are the best placed people to try and resolve it.
Yeah.
Whether we have the emotional regulation to do it is a different question.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you, Jordan. If I was to ask you, what is the most important skill or the most important factor in a healthy relationship, what would you say?
Transparency, honesty, I think. For me, I like working in an encouraging environment because I feel like I build others up too, I think for me, I know that I'm quite good at generating enthusiasm around a cause. So I do sort of expect others to be as enthusiastic, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I think on the other hand of that, which is probably the flip side of the coin, is if I find someone to be inherently negative all the time, or that maybe were dismissive of ideas from not just from myself, but more from others. That's what I would find quite difficult, right?
Yeah.
Outside of work, my friends would say that I hold grudges for other people.
Okay.
So, if we are friends and someone has wronged you 3 years ago, Vince, I will never forget that. I really do hold grudges for things like that. But maybe I wouldn't be as willing to resolve something if someone was rude to me or did something directly to me. So I think there's nuances of it, both sides. But I think that that transparency, that respect, that honesty, I think all rolls into something really, really important that you need to have.
Yeah.
And I've worked in teams before where I've found that maybe with some people, but not all people, if that makes sense. There's a layer for me too, in the sense of I'm an openly gay man, and I've worked in businesses where I've worked under men who I know aren't the most accepting, maybe make some remarks, not about me or anything specifically. So I would now know that I typically, if I was going into a job with a male line manager or someone who was a head of, I would need to know that they are a nice person. I don't want to work for a dictator anymore and those things. So I do think that now that I've got to this age, I really do understand what I want from an outsider looking into a team. And obviously there's times where you make mistakes, or a job is sold to you differently, or people can be false, of course. But I do think I've got a good sense of sussing that out. But then again, I can also be quite almost too trusting sometimes on the other side of being a bit skeptical and holding those grudges too. So there's so many things. I know that there's so many ways I can be, and there's so many nuances in a team. But for me, fundamentally, the most important thing would be that there's a shared cause, there's a shared vision, and that someone is uplifting rather than negative. Yes. I hope that's answered your question, but I think, do you know what I mean?
I mean, there's so much that we could unpick there, so much great stuff. But what I'm hearing is fundamentally what you you look for, because you mentioned transparency and honesty at the start, is in a great relationship, there is good communication for that transparency and honesty 100%. To happen. But then you mentioned that in your personal life, there are times where people have hurt you and then you've held a grudge against them. Yeah. So underneath this great layer of communication, there's often, which I agree with, that makes a great relationship. There's something that we often don't talk about enough, which is our ability to regulate our emotions. Yeah. Props up our ability to communicate well. Yeah. So let's say one of those people that hurt you in the past and you're still hurt by them suddenly came into the room. Would you be able to communicate as effectively with them at that moment?
No, for the listeners. No, for the listeners, I wouldn't. And I hold that up, like my hands up to that 100%.
And that's really normal.
It is, yeah, it is. But then again, I'm thinking, like, I'm getting the mind rolling, like, I've worked with managers before that I may not particularly have liked or that have done something on me, you know, or that I've held a grudge. But I feel like I still try and buck my ideas up and get on with it, you know?
So, and I think this is one of the difficulties that people find with conflict. If you're naturally a little bit more cautious of it or avoidant, one of the reasons that happens is because you're naturally more empathetic. You can see people's body language. You're aware of the tone and the facial expressions that they pull. You're mindful of your past relationship with them. Because you're empathetic, you probably thought at some point, maybe not even consciously, oh, I don't want to add something. I don't want to bring down their vibe. And
that's it.
And so people that are, and I include myself in this, more hesitant around conflict, it is often because we're more attuned to what's going on for other people. Yeah. And it's a double-edged sword in that it is an absolute gift to be able to pick up on the tone in a meeting, the fact, even the way someone breathes. Have you ever looked at your partner from the back and you know when they're rolling their eyes?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But there are other people who are completely oblivious to that, even when they're sat opposite 100%. Each other.
I would know if my mum was in a bad mood, literally from the way she took a step. Do you know what I mean? Like the way she comes down the stairs, I'll know straight away.
The opposite is people will often maybe be more confident in conflict, may miss all of those cues. So they're self-confident in that I'm happy to tell you exactly what I think, but I will miss that I've hurt you. Yeah. I will miss that you closed up a little bit, and I will go, that was a great conversation. And this is, again, sometimes we attach the wrong words to people. Mm-hmm. So confidence is one that comes out a lot in the workplace. Oh, I don't feel very confident to have conflicts. I don't feel very confident to speak up. This other person's really confident, but confidence might not be the right word at all. Just because someone will say their piece doesn't mean that it's warranted, doesn't mean that they've thought it through, doesn't mean that it's, kind and the right thing to do. So one of the questions that comes up is, how do I get more confident with conflict? Confidence is really two things. Yeah. Which is your knowledge and your ability to practice it. So when it comes to conflict, which is a difficult conversation, most people have never been taught how to have conflict effectively. Yeah. If you were lucky enough to grow up in a really emotionally intelligent household, great, it's probably been demonstrated for you. Yeah. Most people haven't. They just grew up in an average household where there's a bit of arguing, there's a bit of silent treatment, there's someone that bulldozes the conversation, there's someone that sends, passive aggressive texts throughout the family group. That's me. And so you get a whole smattering of different things. Yeah. But most of those things are not very helpful.
Of course, to the end result.
To get the result that we're after, which is...
So right.
This is a problem that we're having, and all we need to do is problem solve. Yeah. But we don't often see it like that because of all the emotions that kick in. So the more that we can, learn some good tools and techniques, some frameworks to guide the conversation, and then B, practice it, that is it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, because it does take time, it gets easier and easier.
To have those conversations and to do those things.
But I'll just add, this is often something that people don't want to do.
Yeah, of course.
People will hear this and go, yeah, okay, great. But Vince, when I get into conflict, I'm not the problem 9 times out of 10. The other person is. So I don't need to practice anything.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to that attribution error where we don't see ourselves as having a problem with listening, as seeing ourselves as having a problem with conflict. It's someone else's issue.
Yeah.
We cannot control what other people will do in a discussion.
Yeah,
if we fall out, I cannot control how you respond. But what I can do is influence you to have a more positive conversation by how I enter into the conversation and how I respond.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. I had a bit of conflict, a bit of drunken conflict with a friend the weekend. A friend that I've known for probably 15 years. When we resolved everything after, one thing we realized is that because we were so close, we felt more comfortable cutting deeper, saying nastier things, you're this, you're that, pointing the fingers, which obviously is completely unhealthy, but we only felt that we were able to do that and we carried on was because we know each other so well, which is obviously the wrong thing to do. But I think we sometimes forget that we are also in the driving seat when it comes to a conversation. It's not just a one-way thing. Like you said, we do have the ability to guide how you think someone's going to respond. Is someone raising their voice at me, for example, but I'm going to stay calm? Those sorts of things, and it's just, I think, things that we forget to think about, you know?
Well, and that's part of the problem is that when we are in conflict, almost every time, if not every time, our emotions rise. So what happens biologically? Let's say you say something to me. It goes through all sorts of layers.
Yeah.
Through past experiences, maybe that we have together, or something similar. It goes through beliefs. We've always got to remember that what I'm about to say it does not excuse what you've said.
Yeah,
I'm just going to put that out
course.
there. So if you said something unpleasant,
Yeah.
such as Vince, you've got big ears. Okay, you have a part to play in how I feel.
Yeah, of course.
But the meaning that I attach lies with me.
Yeah, okay.
If I've had bad experiences of something like that in the past, I will attach a different meaning to if no one's ever said that before.
Yeah.
If I am hungry, tired, not had a cup of coffee in the morning, if I am in a more negative emotional state because maybe something bad has happened earlier on compared to if it's my birthday and I'm really happy, if it's not meeting some of my needs, if I think it doesn't quite click with some of the values that I have as a person, I will interpret what you've said differently to someone sat next to me that might hear exactly the same response. And therefore, our brains go, right, this is what's being said, and it reaches back into our memories, and our amygdala, our emotional processing center, will respond quicker than our logical processing center. And what goes on, and you will have experienced this, and you physically feel it, is the amygdala sends out adrenaline.
Yeah.
And it puts the gas pedal onto what's called our sympathetic nervous system. So our heart rate goes up, we breathe a bit faster, you get clammy hands, you become more alert. So if I said something really unpleasant to you, or maybe not really unpleasant, but it
something that struck a nerve.
That's it, that struck a nerve, you would suddenly become really switched on to the conversation.
Yeah.
And you would be watching all of my facial expressions, and you would get just a gut feeling to, that doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
And afterwards, your logical processing center might catch up and go, well, he might not have meant it like that.
Yeah, of course.
But that is so much slower that I've already sown a seed of distrust.
Yeah.
Now, why I'm sharing this with you is the better we understand that and the better we recognize it's happening for us, that, oh, hang on a second, Vince, you're reacting to something that may not be true.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Jordan didn't mean it that way. Maybe maybe he didn't intend for it to come across that way.
Yeah.
Maybe he was being curious rather than judgmental. The better we can understand what's going on inside of us, the more control and therefore choice we have over how we may react.
Which is such a good point as well, because it's all things like that. It's all how we receive it, isn't it? And we've spoke about that, you know. So I might be sensitive to a bit of feedback or something, the way someone spoke to me or something like that. But it might not be personal, even though it's hard to take it not personally
absolutely.
or things like that. So it's just, I suppose it's how we combat that or something.
Well, yeah, how we interpret it. But I think it is really important to say that, let's say I am providing feedback and it is difficult to take. I, as the person providing, have a duty to be thoughtful about how I deliver it.
Okay, yeah.
Just because the meaning it lies with you more so does not mean that absolves me of responsibility.
Yeah, that's quite affirming to hear, to be honest with you.
Yeah. For ease, we could say it's 50-50.
Yeah.
I should be careful around how I deliver messages, and you should be careful around how you receive them. And if both people are willing to do that, all of a sudden the difficult conversation is less difficult and more just a conversation.
Yeah. Some people in their work may be facing a difficult manager, difficult line manager, or maybe a head of department or something like that. What if they don't have like a robust HR department, or there isn't processes that can be followed with mediation? Is there any advice that you would have in that situation?
Yes. First of all, you're not alone. There's a reason that I think it's Gallup that did the study a few years ago now that said somewhere between 5 and 7 people leave jobs because of managers, not because of the job itself. Whether that's true, I'm not entirely sure, but there's certainly truth to it, that managers play a massive part in people's well-being, their feelings at work, their experience in general. And actually, the success of a company, I know I'm going off slightly tangential, but it's so important that middle management have their fingers in so many elements of a company, but they often receive very little training.
Yeah.
Certainly around people management, which is why I think that stat is so high, because they were a great individual contributor and they went, I'm after a bit more money, I'm after a promotion, and the only option for them is to then manage a team of people.
Yeah.
And
they may not have that people management experience.
It's a very different set of skills, and then they're not given much opportunity. And unfortunately, some managers are given the answer, when they ask for help, well, that's what I hired you for you to work this out. And then they're squashed between competing priorities. And so one of the common questions, like how do we deal with bad management? How do I deal with a micromanager? Things like that gets asked a lot. Is first of all, I know this is easier said than done. Remember, they are a human and a person as well. Yeah. And often the bad management, not always, there are just some bad managers out there. Often bad management is a symptom of all sorts of stuff that they've got going on, and they don't know how to deal with it. It's stress, competing priorities, not having the skills, not being taught how to do it. I don't know how to manage all of this stuff. I'm just going to go into control mode, and therefore they turn into a micromanager, or they become insensitive, or they bulldoze the conversation to speed through. So it's often a symptom. However, if you do want to try and address it and you don't have any external support, I will say this first of all, because it's what most people want to hear. They want me to say, well, just leave, because that's an easier option. But that's only easy if you're, again, in the luxurious position that you can just jump to another job. And I think sometimes we underestimate that. It's not easy for people to just move to another job. There are lots of constraining factors that means they've got to stay there. Yeah. So what do we do if we can't just leave, and we've got to deal with, or got to make the best of this situation? There are a few steps you can take. The first one won't be for everyone, but it can help some people, is see that your relationship is symbiotic with your manager. You both need each other. And for things to change, that might be an important mindset to take, that they're not just a problem. They're not something I want to avoid all the time, and I need them, they need me. And for me to change this, I've got to accept that to an extent. If you can do that, there's a few other steps you can take. First one is having transactional clarity. So one of the things that causes a lot of discourse between a manager and their team member is miscommunication. So there was a study done, and I can't remember who did it, but it was 200 managers and team member combinations, and they asked them at the start of the study, how confident are you that you are on board with each other, you understand each other, that everything's clear? And pretty much all of them said yes. I think it was 80% of them said yes. And then when they did it, only 20% of them actually had crystal clear clarity.
Sure.
So there's often a big disconnect between what we think someone's saying and what is actually being said.
Sure.
So transactional clarity is important. Then if we want to start improving the relationship, we need to know about the manager's strengths, weaknesses. What can we prop up and support? So if their micromanagement, as an example, is a symptom, can we help them in some way with something else that might reduce their stress and tension?
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned this earlier, that conflict is often caused by, I think it's someone else's fault and nothing to do with me. And in this case, it might be true, but that doesn't mean I cannot help. And that's such a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
If someone is not very kind to us, not respectful, do we want to help them out?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it might improve our situation? For lots of people, they'll still say no.
Yeah. And I can relate to that.
Me too.
Sometimes it's really hard to pick yourself back up whenever you feel like someone's weighing you down. And especially we've talked about it when it's feeling that personal.
Yeah.
Why would I do them a favor if they're making me feel like this? You know, it's to me, it's almost a self-respect thing, you know?
100%.
But I completely get what you're saying and what your point is. And I'll let you finish is, you know, sometimes I guess that we do have to like look at it from an outside in too, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this situation, usually managers will perform poorly. I'll just stick with micromanagement because it's such a common topic. Usually it happens, this won't cover every possibility, but usually it's 4 reasons. So number 1, they are unaware that they're doing it. And so how do you deal with that? You can let them know.
Yeah.
Are you, be careful around how you label
Word
it.
Yeah.
You don't want to attach it to them. So one of the words that we have to be mindful of is the word you. You do this.
Yeah, okay.
Or saying words like always and never. You always,
yeah.
Micromanagers, you never give us any space.
Yeah.
Well, you sounds more accusatory than you might mean it, and it sounds very personal. Always and never is an over-exaggeration.
Mm-hmm.
So we try and keep the language as neutral as possible and err on the side of grace. So I'm just wondering if you're aware that some of the things that have happened might be being perceived as micromanagement. I'm wondering whether we can just have a quick chat about it.
Oh my God. I'm thinking about if I ever tried to say that to some of the managers that I've had over the years, I don't know how it would be received.
Which is why it's not right in every situation. And we've got to be mindful that, and this is hard, that some people won't want to hear that.
Of course,
so
100%.
Your knowledge of the person will supersede any sort of tip that I can give.
Yeah,
if you know that they are...
And what you're saying is right. I agree with what you're saying 100%. I don't want the listeners to think that I don't, Vince. I totally get that. Maybe that's a me problem again, that I wouldn't ever feel comfortable. And we've talked about like accusatory words and things like that. Even in the politest way possible, I don't think I could tell someone that they're being a micromanager. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So even avoiding that word might be important.
Yeah.
In some context.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Okay. Not going straight in with it. Yeah.
So first one is that they're unaware that it's an issue. The second one is they're aware, but it's a symptom, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm mindful, maybe I'm the manager. Yes, I know I'm asking a lot of you. Yes, I know I get involved in lots of things, but it's because I need it to be finished. I've got this and this happening. And so how do we deal with that? That's the support. All right. How best can I help you then? What needs to change in this relationship so that you are comfortable with me taking this on.
Yeah.
So something really easy would be, easy in inverted commas there, would be at the start of a project, if you're unsure, if you think someone's going to micromanage you, asking them for their input very early on. So can I have your input with X?
Yeah.
And once you've given it me, brilliant. I think I'm in the right space to tackle Y and Z and complete this project now.
Yeah.
So you invite them in and then give a boundary of, I can take it from here.
Sure. Yeah.
So little things like that might help some people out. The third reason that micromanagement might happen is that people are aware and don't care.
Yeah.
So that's what most people think micromanagers are. They know exactly what they're doing, but I don't care. I know what's right and you need to do it my way. My experience is that is a lot less often than people realize.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that people don't have bad experiences, certainly do, and there are definitely some managers that do that. It's less common.
Yeah.
And it's that fundamental attribution error comes in because we go, I would never do that.
Yeah, of course.
And therefore, they must be consciously doing it for them to behave that way.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's their character. And all of a sudden, the manager's making some bad choices, but we attach it to their personality. And that creates a massive divide between us. And that's where you get the them and us. So, and this ties back to, one of the things that how do we manage conflict in general? Again, it sounds so simple, but I think it's a really, really important thing to try and hold on to is seeing the other person's humanness.
Yeah.
This manager is someone's daughter or son. They might be someone's partner. They might have kids of their own. They probably go home and have big cuddles with them and read their kids a story in bed. They're not this person all of the time. And if I can hold on to that, I'm more likely to try and offer support. I'm more likely to shore up some of their weaknesses so that, we can deal with it. We're more likely to have a honest and candid conversation around it. When we attach the problem that they're displaying to their whole character, the chance of that happening becomes further and further away for both people. And what started off as a little bit of micromanaging grows and grows and grows, and the distance between us grows, and recovering from that can be quite hard.
Quite hard, yeah. That's it. Honestly, this has been so insightful for me, to be honest with you. Like really, really good stuff that we've covered, and I so agree with so much of what you've said. I mean, I've obviously said, there's some things that maybe I wouldn't feel comfortable saying or saying properly, or putting as clearly as that, but I don't think that it's wrong at all. What I would love to know, to sort of round everything up, is there a point where it goes beyond natural mediation? What if someone is facing genuine workplace bullying or harassment or something like that? Where is the line, and what extra steps you need to take if you feel like this is serious issues?
Yeah, mediation is not right in every situation. And this is only my experience. There's very few things that on paper mediation could help with. However, the specific details and the characters involved and the context in the situation makes lots of things not suitable for mediation.
Sure.
So bullying is a great example. I've mediated bullying cases, genuine grievances put in against each other because of this, and it's been successful. And there are other cases where I've read it and gone, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I can see this is way too complex, far too much backstory. I'm not a counsellor.
Of course,
and that's really important.
I get you.
If any listeners are managers, leaders themselves, and they're expected to do mediation, knowing your skill level and the boundaries is crucial, because you might open someone up. And this happens certainly when you improve your listening skills. People open up really quickly, but if you don't know how to put them back in, all of everything that's come out back into the box safely, they then leave your space with everything exposed.
Yeah.
And you might have gone, oh, I did a great job there. but you might not have. So just be mindful of that. There's a little side note. So if you've got a case where you're unsure around the backstory, you're unsure about your skill level and comfortableness, for want of a better word, with it, I would always go to someone and ask for a second opinion.
Sure.
HR is a great place to start if it's available. If it's not, because maybe you work in a small organization and HR is just a single person and it's only part of their role. So maybe they're the COO and HR and finance all rolled into one. That's quite normal. They might actually not know any more about what you should do. And so you could speak to them and they might get external advice, from a lawyer or someone like that. But certainly speaking to, a trusted colleague, this is really important, someone that's going to listen and not reaffirm your own feelings.
Right, okay.
And what I mean
someone
by
that can challenge it.
Yes, but maybe not even that sometimes. So let's say you were really upset with someone that I also knew, and you go, "Oh, Vince, they've said this and they've done this, and I'm really upset about it." And I respond with, "Oh, I know," or they always do some things like that. That is not a helpful response to finding a solution. I am reinforcing your negative feelings at the moment. Equally, it's not particularly helpful to straight away go, "Well, have you done this? Well, you should have thought about it like this." Or don't think about it like that, and try and tell you how to feel differently. And it's not actually that helpful to immediately go into problem solving. What you want is someone that will just listen and create a space that helps you clarify your own thoughts and give you a chance for all of those emotions to kind of settle down, adrenaline to kind of flush out, cortisol to be flushed away, and re-engage our logical processing. This is a problem. I am hurt. But when we start thinking about it as, all right, what's the most effective way to address this? That there's lots of factors in play here. Maybe I don't want to hurt them. Maybe I want to get my voice and my opinion across really clearly. Maybe I need some other things to fall into place. Let's do some problem solving activities. Let's come up with some different options. That's very hard to do from an emotional place. So if you don't have access to HR, find someone that will give you space to think.
100%. I completely agree. Like, find that trusted confidant, and I can think of them in places I worked. I talked about my colleague Ruby earlier, but she also plays devil's advocate really well. Maybe she knows that I'm sometimes more emotional and can bring it back. So I think, and again, we spoke about it, you have to know people that don't always agree with you.
Absolutely.
Again, I really enjoyed today's discussion. If you had one last point or anything that you haven't discussed or something that you want to leave listeners with, what would that be?
The willingness to work on your own emotional regulation. And that sounds like a rubbish answer because, again, people go, but it's not me, it's them.
It's them,
That feeling is an emotional response. So the better we can control our feelings, as I mentioned earlier, the more choice we have around how to deal with things. Then improve your knowledge of ways to communicate in conflict, and then be willing to practice it.
Where can our listeners follow you? That's another big question. You can plug as many things as you want.
Social media is where I do most of my stuff. So TikTok, Vince Sanderson, Instagram, Vince Sanderson. It might be Vincent. I can never remember which name I've put down. I've got the same picture across all of them. YouTube, if you prefer reading, I put out stuff on Medium. Some bigger organizations publish some of my articles. LinkedIn, and then people can message directly. They'll always find my details on there.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Really Thank you.
It. Like, I would have you back again, to be honest with you, but
sure, you say that to everyone.
And that's the end of today's episode. Thank you once again for tuning in. As always, if you're in the market for a new role, why not check out Brook Street online? There may just be a dream job waiting there for you. Don't forget to follow us and leave some feedback wherever you listen to your podcast. And don't forget to share it with a friend or colleague either. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.